All right, so this is me, and I'm going to talk about just my abject frustration as someone who is disabled, trying to maintain disabled friendships, because quite frankly, a lot of them are beyond one-sided, and it is really something that is a prevalent issue, and it pisses me the actual fuck off, because it is really frustrating to constantly deal with this with nascent friends, and also frustrating because everyone I try to talk to about it, for the most part, there definitely are some exceptions, but for the most part, they just seem to act like, oh, well, you're being too unfair, they're disabled, you need to cut them breaks, and just basically acting like it's my fault for expecting more, when I am definitely the victim here. I'm the one who's being neglected. I'm the one who's not feeling like I'm important. I'm the one who's getting depressed. I'm the one who feels alone, you know, and I'm sure there's other people in my situation as well who are dealing with the same frustrations on one or more of those fronts. And when you try to vent about it, people just act like you're the bad guy. So I'm gonna illustrate my point. This is the video right here. I might react to it later. And they have a little list in the things about all of the things that they talk about with one-sided relationships. Now, this is specifically for one-sided, like, romantic relationships, but I think a lot of this can apply to friendships as well. And these quote-unquote friendships I try to have really just freaking have a lot of these, and they suck for that. Like, let's see. Number one, you make all the plans. Yeah, that basically describes almost every relationship I have with someone who's disabled. You know, they never reach out to you. They never make plans. They never invite you anywhere. It's always on you to set up and do everything. And, you know, I can understand some shortcoming if you're disabled, where, you know, maybe instead of being 50-50, it's like 60-40, 65-35. But when it starts getting beyond like 80-20-80 and you're making like 4 times more of the effort than they are, that becomes disheartening, because it makes you think, does this person even give a crap? Does this person even want me around? Or am I just a convenience? And you feel alone. It's like, sometimes it's nice when people reach out and say, what's going on? And just make you know that they're thinking about you, that you're important, and just giving you someone to talk to. And number 2 builds off that. You're not a priority. Yeah, I don't feel like a priority at all in a lot of these relationships. Never have. It's not even just the fact that they never reach out. And I feel like getting together with me is way down below taking out the trash and freaking whacking off. Half the time, when I have to set shit up and I try to make plans, they don't even reciprocate. Like, I try to ask, when are you free? And I get no response. I try to say, what would you like to do? No response. And obviously, if I can't even get the what are we doing, when are we doing, where are we doing it out, how am I supposed to ever see anybody? Like, that is basic shit. And disabled or not, that's something that they need to be able to give you if you're ever going to have any relationship work. And it's something that a lot of disabled people do not, in my opinion, give at all. You know, I've had so many people where I wanted to get together with them and I'm like, when are you free? And they just never get back to me. And how is that supposed to work? And it's frustrating too, because it's not something that I really think is related to their inability to do it. Because in a lot of these cases, when I do talk to these people, this is something that they've shown they can do. They know how to respond to text messages. They've done it multiple times in the past. But then when it comes to actually making plans, they're just dead silent. So it's sort of like, it's not an ability issue. I don't know what it is, but it's not an ability issue. And it's not me being too sensitive and being too unfair to them and saying, you need to do this thing that I know you can't do. My dad, in all of his quote-unquote wisdom, always compares it to expecting a blind man to see. That's not true. Then that's a very awful comparison, because expecting a blind man to see is unfair. That's something the blind man has never done, and I have no reason to expect that he should suddenly be able to do it for me. But when I'm expecting somebody who has responded to text messages to do it again, and they are just not responding at all, that's not expecting a blind man to see. That's expecting someone who has walked before to walk again, and not an extremely long distance. So I don't think that's unreasonable for me to expect. You know, it's like, let me just put it to you this way. It's like if I work at a job and I used to call in and say that I was going to be late, and then I just stopped doing it. I just showed up whenever the hell I felt like, and my boss says, what the hell is this about? You can't be late and you can't not tell me what's going on. And then I say, well, I'm disabled, so you just have to deal with it. Yeah, you're fired, motherfucker. And I would deserve it in that situation 100%. You know, it's insulting. It's insulting because assuming nothing changed, if something changed, obviously that's different, but assuming nothing changed, why can't I do that? Why can't I reach out and say that I'm going to be late when I used to do it just fine? What changed? If nothing changed, then there's no excuse. And the fact that I'm actually trying to give an excuse is infuriating because it just shows I know this problem and I don't give a fuck. And admittedly, the people with disabilities are not so much the ones that do that, but good God, people I try to vent about pull that shit all the fucking time. And that's destructive behavior because it enables that shit. It enables this toxic, no effort behavior, and it doesn't serve anybody. It makes me mad because when I'm being wrong, people downplay it and act like I'm being too sensitive, and no, I'm actually in one-sided relationships and I have every right to be mad and complain about it. And it doesn't benefit the other people because it makes me, the person who's actually saying you need to do better at this, look like the crazy guy. Only he's saying it. He must be wrong, right? And then they wonder why they're 50 and they don't have any friends. Gee, I wonder why. If you never try, that definitely plays a role in it. I kind of went on a tangent here, but I definitely think it was relevant. Number 3, you initiate communication. Oh, God, yes. Oh, God, yes. Maybe a couple of them reach out occasionally to ask how I'm doing, but vast majority of the time, it's me doing all the dang reaching out, making all the initiation. And then eventually I just have to give up because, as I said before, half the time, they just don't even tell you when you're free. And it's like, well, why am I even bothering if I'm basically being ignored? It's too frustrating. You defend his behavior to your friends. Well, I don't have friends, and I don't know. I don't really defend it, but I do feel like, to justify it, I would need to pull excuses out of my ass to defend it. So maybe that sort of applies. Because really, there is no justification. Like, if you can reply to messages and then you just inexplicably don't, and when it's important, and you don't even say, listen, I'll get back to you, or just anything to acknowledge that you got it and that I'm important enough to warrant 5 seconds of your time, then really, what's the justification there? You're disabled? How does that work? Does it apply on days that start with the letter S only? On non-weekends, you can reply fine, but disability manifests itself on the weekends and you don't reply to text messages? Then no, that's not how any disability I know works. That's not how any condition I know works. If you can reply to messages once, you should be able to do it more than once. You should be able to do it all the time. And even if you don't know how to answer the message, you should be able to say, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll get back to you. Just something to acknowledge that I said something and not make it to where I'm talking to a brick wall. You feel stressed? Yeah. Motherfucker, yeah. I literally just said it pisses me off. It makes me depressed. I think that I've already gone over that. They don't go out of their way. No, I think that definitely applies. There's been times I've needed people to back me up and help me on things, and they just don't do it. There's been times I've sent stories that I want them to read and get back to me. Not only did they not do it, they say they're going to do it, and then they just radio silence, and I'm sitting there for months waiting for that feedback before I can move on, so it holds me hostage. Because I'm thinking, send this story, I'll get the feedback, and I'll decide what to do from there. And I never get the feedback, so I never get to actually make any progress. So they don't go out of their way to do that. They also don't go out of their way to tell me they're not going to do it. They say they're going to do it, but then you try to actually make it happen and they just weasel their way out. Weaseling's a major problem. Same thing with, I tried to start a band. My so-called friends said they wanted to do it, tried to set up practices, and they kept weaseling their way out of actually going. So, going out of your way to actually tell me that you were busy or that you really didn't feel like you weren't comfortable, that was apparently too much for you. And I think the real kicker was more recently, I tried to get an apartment to move out because my home situation was frustrating. And I told my so-called friends how serious it was. I mentioned feeling like I was sinking on the Titanic. And none of them did anything. I guess they were scared to do it. And I get the nervousness, but I was counting on you. You said you were going to help me, and I was counting on you. And instead of going out of your way to, overcome your fear and say, well, I'm scared, but my friend needs me, I'm going to back him up. Or at least telling me that this is something that I don't know if I can do, and maybe we could work it out. What did they do? They weaseled. You try to make plans to discuss it, they just inexplicably never tell you when they're free. You try to get together in person so they can't situationally ignore text messages, they don't tell you when they're free. They say last minute, oh, by the way, something came up, instead of going out of their way to do it. And it becomes a war of getting anything done when it should be, not that much of pulling teeth to do basic shit. And again, this is not the disability, because they replied just fine on non-related things. Like, you ask them, how's it going? They say what's going on. You send messages asking questions that are more enjoyable to them. They respond. Then you try to ask a question, hey, what do you think about these apartments I sent you? And they just don't reply. Really? Really, really, really? That's how your disability manifests itself? Bullshit. And I'm tired of people acting like this is at all okay behavior, because it's not. issues are not addressed. I do kind of feel like that too. Now, part of it might be I don't bring them up as much because it's just too much of frustration. When I try to vent about it, everyone else gangs up on me. So maybe I need to address it more at the source. But I also do feel like they weren't addressed. Like the one guy I told, hey, like this is a serious issue and I'm tired of you like dancing around the question. I need some action now. And he's like, oh, okay, fine. I didn't know it was that serious. I'll give it to you. Then he waits a month and he doesn't even try and he doesn't explain himself at all. And it's like, you know what? Come on. I do feel like it's hard to address these issues. Now, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know if this is just how people with disabilities generally are, if this is how the educational system has failed them or what's going on here, but it's definitely a major problem. You know, and there's also another one. You know, he would ignore messages. So one time I ignored it in one of his messages and I said, how does that feel? You know, maybe not the best way to handle it, but kind of just saying, okay, this is how it feels, what you're doing, so you need to stop. And they didn't even reply. They're like, happy Thanksgiving. It's like, come on. You know, I make a point and say, what you're doing is hurting me and you need to stop it. And they just don't even acknowledge it. You know, I feel like I can't even talk about issues with a lot of people too, because for whatever reason, maybe they just don't understand what I'm talking about, or maybe people haven't instilled in them how to actually navigate friendships, but you just can't discuss it as much as you'd like. They don't care or ask about what is happening in your life. Well, if they don't reach out and communicate with you, I think that kind of goes without saying. You know, a lot of these cases, it seems it's more about them than about you. So, but again, it's sort of that kind of builds off number 3, in that if they never actually reach out, they're never actually asking what's going on. But I do say it goes further than that, because it's sort of like, even when you do reach out, they just don't seem to care what's going on in your life. They don't seem to be interested. A lot of times it's about them. Really, it is. There's kind of a selfishness issue that I've seen. Your affections aren't reciprocated. Yeah, maybe it's not affection. It's not a romantic relationship, but I would say the effort's not reciprocated. There was one guy that I tried to be best friends with, and it just, I can't even really reach out to him anymore because he just failed on so many fronts. Like, I don't know, there was one time that he went away to a program and I tried to keep in contact and he just didn't reply for months. So I pulled back, and of course he never reached out. Then I finally made a plan to see him after months of time apart, and you know, I was going to have him stay over at my dorm and it was going to be a good time. And then he comes at 1 o'clock and he leaves at 3 o'clock because he has something to do. So he couldn't even set aside a day to see his friend that he hadn't seen for months and really hadn't talked to for months. So, you know, and I really just enjoy pulling teeth and trying to get this to happen. And I can't even be given a whole day with the guy. And then there was another time too. It just felt like I made all these plans and tried to make these apartment things work, and it just kept dancing around the question. I mean, you know, and I tried to make plans and things just wouldn't work. I felt like, you know, he wasn't really trying. I was the only one making plans. And, you know, half the time he wasn't really reciprocating them, and he wasn't making his own plans to compensate. And eventually, like, we had a falling out, and we fixed things to an extent, but I just don't think I can ever really give him that role that I wanted to give him in the past. Like, I'm not going to let him into my life as much as I used to, because it just burned me too much. You know, I wanted him to be my best friend, and I tried, and it just made it clear that I was not that important to him. I mean, he's definitely reached out a bit more. I'll give him credit, but it's like, you know, I still can't move past that, and I can't really open up to him as much, because the last time I tried that, I got lit on fire, figuratively. You feel that something is wrong. Yeah, I definitely have felt like that too. Like, I feel like something's wrong and not replying as much as they could, but the problem is half the time nothing is wrong. You know, you just aren't a priority, you're not respected, reciprocation isn't there. It's just a one-sided relationship. That's what it boils down to. It is a one-sided relationship where you do most of the damn work and you get almost nothing in return. And I hate to say it, but a lot of people that I've had a relationship with that are disabled are exactly like this. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why it happens. I don't know if it's something to do with just maybe people with disabilities can't do as much. Maybe people haven't instilled in them in the educational system how important it is to actually reciprocate and how important it is to make an effort. That's definitely something that I think could be a plausible explanation for this. It definitely feels like a lot of these programs that are supposed to help don't really help that much. They just cater to the lowest common denominator and push you through without really teaching you much. So maybe that has something to do with it. But whatever it is, it doesn't change the fact that people with disabilities in a lot of cases are extremely hair-pullingly frustrating to have any sort of meaningful relationship with, because it is one-sided. It's extremely one-sided. Let me put it to you this way. Have you ever had that one friend where it just feels like you have to do all the work and they never reach out to you? Imagine if every one of your friends was that one friend, and you see how frustrating and old this gets and how stressful it is. And it really is just really annoying, because you try to vent about it, you try to talk about it, and everyone just jumps on you and says, oh, you're being unfair to them. Oh, you should have expected it, like it's your fault, even though clearly you're the one who's being neglected. You're the one who's not being treated like a priority. You're the one who's not being cared about. You're the one who's being mistreated here. You're doing all the work and they're not doing anything, and you're still at fault. I'm going to give you an example how egregiously ridiculous some people are in this. I've talked to my dad about this a lot, and he's a real fucking big culprit of this shit. There were some guys I met at Special Rec Track, and we both wanted girlfriends. So I'm like, well, why don't we just meet up and go and meet people and have fun on the town? And they seemed to be okay with it, but it never ended up happening, because when I tried to bounce ideas off them, they did not respond and give me their feedback, and they did not bounce ideas off of me either. And then it degraded to the point where even getting them to respond was like pulling teeth. So what I thought was, okay, they're basically kind of dancing around the question out of person, maybe because they're scared. I'm going to meet up in person and bring it up then. That way they can't do the politician move and just dodge the question, so to speak. But then when I tried to get to meet up and do things, they would never say when they were free. They, radio silence, never reach out to me. Multiple messages were ignored. And I know some of the time they didn't have their phone, but clearly I wasn't a priority either, because multiple times I saw messages on Facebook Messenger had the red indication. They never got back to me, and they would update their Snapchat and Instagram a lot. So clearly they didn't have no phone access that whole time. And eventually, just due to lack of effort, I had to pull the plug. It was me basically breathing life into a corpse relationship where there was just no effort on the other side. And when I bring this up to my dad, he's still is delusional enough, I dare say, to act like it's my fault. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that they would do that. I should be more understanding of their disability. No, it is not my fucking fault. I did more than I should have had to do. At some point, you need to back up and say, you know what, they fucked up. You didn't deserve that. But instead, it just seems like they're so obsessed with being PC or whatever that they just fucking can't acknowledge how fucked up what they did to me was. I was repeatedly ignored. I was treated like I didn't mean anything to them. And that's my fault? How is that my fault? What could I have done differently? At some point, they have to fucking try. And they didn't try. That's very clearly a them problem. And yet you bring it up to anyone else and they're like, oh, well, this is your fault. Fuck off. And this is what I have to deal with. And I'm telling you, I'm pretty livid about it. Hopefully you can understand. After years of this shit, I'm done. I'm just fucking done dealing with this. These relationships are not fulfilling. They're draining. I feel like I don't get anything out of them. I feel like they take my life away from me and make me feel like I'm not important. And it's a major fucking problem that needs to be addressed. It's a major problem. Maybe this is a redundant video of the disability community kind of sucks, but I don't care. I'll say it again because it is a problem. It's ridiculously common, and it needs to be addressed. And people need to understand how serious it is and stop downplaying it and painting me as the bad guy when I'm the victim here. I'm the one who was neglected. I'm the one who wasn't treated like I was a priority. I'm the one who they never reach out to and never ask how I'm doing. I'm the one that they won't go out of their way to help when I need their help. I say I need an apartment and they won't even put themselves and their fears aside for 2 seconds to help me get one. Come on. How is this my fault? How is this my fault that they're being selfish and not trying? Explain that to me. I'm really curious about that. Of course, maybe you should try explaining 1 + 1 is 3 to me a little bit too, because I feel like that would be something you'd have a better time convincing me of, because clearly it's not as delusional. I mean, give me a fucking break here. I'm sick of being portrayed as the bad guy when I'm the one who's being fucked over and being given no sympathy or help when I desperately need it. I'm sick of dealing with these frustrating one-sided relationships, and I'm sick of trying to find fulfilling relationships only for it to go down the same route every single time and no one ever holds anyone accountable. I get that they're disabled. I get they can't do as much as some people, but they are not helpless. And the fact that they have shown that they can do this before makes it that much worse, because it's very clear. It just makes it crystal clear that they're not trying in this instance. You know, it makes it crystal clear. But rather than ever fucking address that and maybe improve it so that they do better in mine or future relationships, everyone's too busy soft-soaping it and acting like what they're doing is completely fine. And it pisses me off, and as I said before, it doesn't help them either. It's like a poker player who sucks, but instead of saying, hey, you need to do better at this, this, and this to actually win, you just say, you're doing fine. And then they keep playing and wondering why they keep losing money. Well, gee, I wonder why. Because everyone's enabling your bad behavior and not helping you improve. And the one guy who's got the balls to say, no, actually, this isn't okay, and you're kind of not that good at poker, and you need to really change how you play if you want to win, is easily dismissed as the crazy guy. Because I'm the only one saying anything. Everyone else has me outnumbered. Clearly they must be right, even though no, that's not the truth. Yeah, I'm fucking pissed. Like, I mean, it just makes me mad. It makes me mad that I have to make a fucking video addressing this, because it's been that common. It's not just one person here and one person there. This has been so common and so prevalent in my life that I have to make a fucking half-hour-long rant, maybe not quite as much once editing's done, but half-hour-long rant addressing this and why it's wrong and why people who act like it's not a problem are completely ridiculous. Why do I have to make a video? Why is this so common? Why is enabling this behavior so common? Why does no one ever just say, hey, you need to do better at this. I know you're disabled, but you're clearly not trying here. Why does no one do that? Why does nobody fucking ever just hold anyone accountable? Why am I the guy that's shouting shit in the street, trying to be heard desperately, and I look crazy when it's actually, I'm right? You know, come on. You have to admit I have a fucking point here. How are relationships supposed to work if the other side won't try? How is it their disability and they can't do better if they've shown they can do better in other circumstances doing the same exact thing? Texting, responding to calls, whatever. How is that their disability? And how is it my fault when I've tried more than most people would and I'm just not getting anything in return? How is it my fault? I think it's hypocritical too in my situation too, because you know, you want to excuse their behavior because they're disabled. But then when I try to do things and I don't read up on as much as you supposedly think I should, you just act like I'm not disabled and I should expect to be as functional as everyone else. Complete hypocrisy. You know, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, well, they can't do better because of their disability, then look at me and say, well, why didn't you do a better job of realizing this? You can't have it both ways. You know, if there's one thing I hope people take away from this video, it's do better. Seriously, just do better. I know you can do better. If after watching this, you realize, wow, a lot of the stuff that he described that's frustrating is stuff that I do all the time, do better. Like, I know you can do it. It's definitely possible for you to start asking how people are doing if you don't do it, to start getting back to messages a bit more if you don't do it well, to start reaching out and making enough effort to show the other person that you were thinking of them. It's possible to make these changes. Don't act like it's not. And don't use the disability as an excuse if you are. Please. And the same thing applies with the enabler squad and people who soft soap and act like I'm bad for calling criticism to this. Do better. Stop enabling this behavior. Stop acting like it's okay and how dare I lift a finger against the disabled population. Stop it. You're not helping anybody, at least of all the people you claim to be protecting. Because let's be real here. You're instilling in them that their behavior is fine when it's really isolating themselves from other people, and they're going to end up alone if they keep it up. I'm not kidding. Like, I'm not even kidding. How many people watching this would want to sustain a relationship that's just blatantly one-sided, where the other person never asks how they're doing, never reaches out, just blatantly ignores messages half the time even? How many people watching this would want to really put effort into a relationship like that long-term? And yet you're acting like the people who are disabled are okay in doing that just because they're disabled. They're isolating themselves. They're making it worse for themselves, and they're going to end up alone in 20 years because people are just going to get tired of putting in way more in these relationships than they ever get back. It's exhausting. So no, contrary to what you might think, you're not helping them and protecting them against the big bad victor who's out to get them, as you might think. Okay? You're not helping them. You're hurting them. Knock it off and do better.